Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Business Technical Fundamentals series. In this video, we will be covering advanced Windows 10 management capabilities provided by Microsoft 365 Business. In order to access the additional management capabilities that can be provided by Microsoft Intune, you can use the Azure portal, which is available at portal.azure.com. It can be used to deploy an extensive range of profile types and corresponding settings. When in the Azure portal, you can see the policies that were created in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and use the details they provide to help extend capabilities with your own profiles. If you are new to Microsoft 365 and Intune, it's recommended to use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center before venturing into working natively with Intune. You can use the various Intune policies to replicate many of the capabilities that may have previously required group policy, as well as some additional capabilities that are more focused on delivering cloud-based capabilities. Microsoft created the MDM Migration Analysis Tool, also known as MMAT, to help determine how your existing group policy settings map against Windows 10 MDM capabilities. MMAT will determine which group policies have been set for a target user or computer and cross-reference those against its list of built-in supported MDM policies. It will then generate both XML and HTML reports indicating the level of support for each group policy in terms of MDM equivalence. This tool can be downloaded from GitHub, and for many companies it will also allow a thorough review of existing group policies to see which are still required and need to be carried forward. For this demonstration, we will be using the Azure portal rather than the Microsoft 365 Business Admin Center. There are many different things we can configure via Microsoft Intune in the Azure portal, but what we're going to focus on here is going through and taking a look at the different device configuration options for Windows 10. We'll start off by jumping in and just seeing a couple of things here. First of all, you'll notice that we get things like the tenant information, as well as just some summaries of what's going on with the different devices inside the organization. Now, what I really want to focus on here is jumping into profiles, and this is where we can start seeing some additional profiles that we may have created over and above some of the ones that have been created in the Microsoft 365 Business portal. So in this case, what I want to go through is creating a new profile, and then I'll jump back to some of the ones that I've already created. And first of all, we need to start by choosing the platform. So in this case, it needs to be Windows 10. And as you saw in the presentation, there's a variety of different profile types that we can actually create. And the one that we will focus on for here is the device restrictions. So I'll just give it a name of Windows restrictions, and we'll just give it the same description. Now what you can see as we start scrolling across is that there are quite a few different settings and that we can choose, and as we go through each of the different restriction categories, that actually breaks out into additional settings that we can configure even further. So as you can see here, we can go through, we can configure a lot more of the device capabilities themselves. So some of the things that you can see here is, do we want to start doing different types of unenroll or restrictions around controlling cameras in devices, controlling the location capability, so different actions based on where the device may be based. So you can see here that we're getting some fundamental device management capabilities that are being included here. Now we can also go through, start putting different password restrictions in place, and as we scroll through these, this is where you'll start seeing that a lot of these things are going to be very similar to what you may have been using or have seen in group policy in the past. So for personalization, if we want a different desktop background to be applied to all of these devices, maybe it's something with the company logo, for example, which is obviously commonly used. What do we want the lock screen experience to be? How do we want that to be customized? So there's obviously quite a few different settings here. And what's important to note is, even though we do have a lot of different settings here under device restrictions, this is just one of the categories, because obviously not everything falls under the category of device restriction. Now, rather than going through and creating this and saving it, I'll just highlight a few of the ones that I've actually already pre-configured, because if you've gone through and either if you have watched the Windows Autopilot module already, what you'll notice is that a lot of the capabilities that I've got here are being leveraged in that environment. So some of the things in here around the customized start layout, for example, some of the MDM settings, these are things that I'm actually using for that autopilot environment. So if we take a look here at the start layout, I'm happy to discard those changes. I don't really need them. Oops. If we take a look at the properties, in this case, what I've done is I've gone through and I've exported the XML settings from via PowerShell so it gets exported out to an XML file, and then I've just imported those into this custom setting. So it means that I can go through and effectively have that lockdown experience so that people are getting that standardized desktop when they click on the Start menu. Now, I won't go through and make any changes here, but we can definitely take a look at the XML file that I've pasted in. But when we're creating these customized deployments, what you can see here is that some of this we have to sort of get into some additional details over and above of just a simple yes/no answer, but it's quite easy to go through, and this is very well documented. Some of the other settings in here, if we take a look through here, is just to tie it back to some of the other capabilities that we had covered elsewhere. So things like using Windows Analytics to go through and start reporting back into that centralized reporting service. Even with Windows Analytics, some of the things that we need to think about here is, what level of reporting do we actually want coming back into Microsoft? So if we take a look at the settings here, and we scroll down, you'll see here reporting and telemetry. So what I've done in here is I've said, look, in this case, I want to submit as much telemetry data as possible so that I can go through and ensure that when I am looking at things like Windows Analytics, that I am getting the most accurate results possible. But if you're in an organization that doesn't want to send full reporting through, we can drop down to enhanced, basic, and security. Now, the option that you choose here is going to really depend on what you're doing with that data. So if you're not sure how this ties in to things like getting additional information on your network or your PCs, take a look at the assessing your current environment video, because we actually cover that in a lot more detail. So that's just some of the things that we can do through device restrictions, but there's a few other areas in here that I'll walk you through regarding Windows 10, just so you can get an idea of a few other places we can look at things. So under software updates, this is where we can go through and we can start looking at things like the Windows update rings. So we can see how things are going, how the deployments have been. And once we take a look at how we manage the Windows 10 update rings, if I say that I wanted to create a new policy, or what we can do here is say, what is it that we want? So do we want semi-annual? Do we want to even start assigning Windows Insider? So if we want to make sure that we're really having a variety of different Windows builds available internally, we can do that. But some of the things in here you can see is that effectively what we're doing here is we're controlling Windows Update for Business. So we're effectively configuring the device so that it knows, okay, that we want it to get updates, we want it to get product updates, so additional things that may be installed on the system from Microsoft that aren't necessarily part of Windows. What are the automatic update behaviors? What are the active hours? So we can go through and start configuring these. So the reason why I'm sort of showing these first ones is to give you an indication of some of the things that you've probably had to do in the past with group policy and how you can easily do them through Intune. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here is this delivery optimization download mode. And this is how we can start using HTTP peering to start doing peer distribution on our own network to make sure that we can really leverage other parts of an update that somebody else may have already downloaded. So whether we're talking about monthly updates that are coming down from the Windows Store, whether we're talking about the I guess in this case, some of the things like the new builds. So if we're talking about, 1803, for example, we can really start saving on internet bandwidth by actually allowing on-network peering of these capabilities. Now, obviously, you can see by the number of different options you've got here is, it's not necessarily going to work in everyone's environment. So you may want to be able to go through, start restricting based on site name, start restricting based on the network, because you don't really want to be, just having this work in environments and it trying to sort of go across a slow connection, for example. But you've got enough different choices here to be able to build out what's going to work best for those target clients without it having to be a one-size-fits-all approach. So that's just a really quick look at what we can do in Intune inside of here. But obviously, this is something where once you start working with the MMAT, it will give you ideas of some of the existing policies that you need to carry forward. But one of the things that we always recommend is when you do work with MMAT to get an idea of what policy settings are currently in place, analyzing them to see, are they ones that make sense moving forward, or are they things that can actually be achieved elsewhere? So it's always worth spending a bit of time getting re-familiar with what policy settings are in place, especially if it's an environment where some of these things haven't been very well documented over the years. So we'll leave that there and we'll go back to the presentation. As you can see, there are many additional capabilities exposed through Intune, but for those of you who are new to Microsoft 365 Business and don't have Intune experience, you can start with the capabilities in the Admin Center before progressing to Intune in the Azure portal.